Yo, what's going on everyone? My name is Sixang, and today I'm going to be doing a review on Pokemon SoulSilver. SoulSilver, along with Heart Gold, are remakes of the Game Boy Color games Pokemon Gold and Silver. These were the second remakes made in the Pokemon series following Fire Red and Leaf Green. But contrary to those remakes, we explore a different region than Kanto, known as the Johto region. And with a new region comes new Pokemon. However, SoulSilver and Heart Gold were not just expansions to the Pokédex. They offered a lot more than that. SoulSilver and Heart Gold released on the Nintendo DS in Japan in 2009, and most other regions in 2010. This time period is very significant since these games were released between Pokemon Platinum and Pokemon Black and White. Some may consider this period the peak of the Pokemon franchise, not specifically because of critical acclaim, but because a lot of fans really enjoyed Gens 4 and 5, as well as the Gen 2 remakes. I played pretty much all these Pokemon games when they released, except for SoulSilver and Heart Gold. I do remember promising a friend that I would get SoulSilver if he got Heart Gold, but for some reason, I flaked and I never got the game. If you're watching this, I'm sorry man. It's still something I regret to this day, seriously. So, although I never played SoulSilver growing up, it's a game that's been in my backlog for a long time. I'm happy I finally had a chance to play it, and I'm excited to be doing this review. Let's get into it. For this review, I won't be going into detail on the basics of how Pokemon games work, but if you're interested, you can watch my Fire Red review where I talk about that, as well as the first Pokemon remake. Check out the card on screen. Also, I don't think anyone really cares with these games, but I will be talking about spoilers, just an FYI. Our journey in Johto begins in New Bark Town. Here, we meet Professor Elm, who gives us our first Pokemon. As usual, we get to pick from a trio. The starters in this game are Chikorita, Totodile, and Cyndaquil. Picking from the three was pretty easy for me since Typhlosion is my favorite Pokemon, so I went with Cyndaquil. Elm gives us this Pokemon so we can meet up with someone named Mr. Pokemon. Upon our arrival, not only do we meet Mr. Pokemon, we also bump into Professor Oak. Mr. Pokemon gives us a mystery egg, and Oak gives us a Pokédex so we can lock Pokemon during our journey. But before we return to Professor Elm, we bump into our rival character for the first time. I named him Silver. Not because I'm playing SoulSilver, but canonically, I think that's his name. I thought Gary was a big jerk in Fire Red, but this dude might be even worse, which can be seen as a good thing ironically. Silver is someone you'll bump into multiple times throughout your journey, so get used to facing off with this guy. Once we get back to New Bark Town, we give Elm the mystery egg and tell him about everything that happened along the way. Elm suggests you take on the Pokemon Gym Challenge, and you decide to follow his advice. After a brief conversation with your mom, you're finally free to explore the Johto region. In comparison to Fire Red, I don't think this game was as difficult for me. And just so you're aware, for the most part, I consider my time with SoulSilver as a blind playthrough, so I wasn't looking up gym types. I worked with what I had, and I didn't really have too many issues. I spent a little bit of time leveling up my Pokemon outside of the regular flow of things, but it never felt like tedious grinding, which was relieving. One of my main complaints about Fire Red was the lack of diversity in what kind of Pokemon you could find. It seemed like everywhere you turn, you just find Pidgeys and Rattatas. And yeah, SoulSilver suffers from this a little bit, but I don't think it's as drastic. There were quite a few Pokemon I caught early on that became mainstays of my party in SoulSilver. Huge shout out to Mareep, which I eventually evolved into Ampharos. Their utility was so clutch for me, and I probably used them more in my playthrough than my Typhlosion. Speaking about just the region itself, I think Johto and SoulSilver is very lively. Goldenrod might be the highlight out of all the cities, but places like Blackthorn and Olivine were some of my favorites. Landmarks like the Dragon's Den and Lighthouse really make things feel unique and add character to each place you visit. On top of this, I had fun exploring additional areas like the Whirl Islands and Pokeathlon Dome. And these places aren't just here for show. There's actual stuff to do everywhere you visit in Johto. From basic stuff like photo ops with your Pokemon, to exploring the revamped Safari Zone, I'm sure you'll find something besides the regular gameplay that piques your interest. Some of my favorite things included dressing up my Pokemon and participating in the Pokeathlon. Although I was pretty bad at it, not gonna lie. A few other things worth mentioning are the money saving system and the Pokegear. You have the option to save funds from battle and send them over to your mom. Occasionally, she'll purchase items with your savings, which is a bit invasive, but the items she buys are things like berries for you to take on your journey. As for the Pokegear, it's a device with a few functions like looking at your map, but also serves as a phone. Some trainers you meet will ask to exchange numbers and may call you at random to give you updates on their end. All these little things may seem insignificant when looked at individually, but put together, it complements the core gameplay and creates an enjoyable experience. Something that was surprising to me was the return of Team Rocket. They didn't really pose a threat to me on my journey, but I felt like they were more involved in this game than in Fire Red. which was a plus to me. Seeing new leaders and their unique personalities was a nice touch. Also, teaming up with Lance against Ariana was a cool moment that I enjoyed. And now that I brought up Lance, let's talk about the gyms in the Elite Four and SoulSilver. Like I mentioned earlier, I didn't struggle too much with the difficulty of the game, but I figured we could take a moment to talk about the styles and puzzles in the gyms. Some that come to mind are Morty and Claire's gyms. Morty is a ghost type gym leader, so his gym was kinda spooky, but what makes it annoying is having to watch your step while navigating your way to him in the dark. As for Claire, she's a sore loser that doesn't want to give you a gym badge, so you have to go to the Dragon's Den to take a little quiz. And I mean all this sarcastically, by the way. These little nuances are staples to the Pokemon games and aren't detrimental to the experience at all. Before we talk about the Elite Four, there is something that occurs before you face them. Throughout your journey, there are these mysterious kimono girls that you encounter, who eventually invite you to a showdown at their dance hall. Here, you battle the kimono girls individually, and each one has an Eevee variant. You battle them in succession, and once you beat them, you can now face the main legendary Pokemon of the game, Lugia. To face Lugia, you must travel to the Whirl Islands, where you meet once again with the Kimono Girls. Here, they perform a dance ritual that summons Lugia, and you are granted the opportunity to face off against them. I tried my hardest to catch them with a regular Pokeball, but I gave in and ended up using my Master Ball. Lugia was yet another great addition to my team, and came in handy against the Elite Four. Right before getting to Victory Road, Silver challenges you to a final battle. Of course, he doesn't win, but this time he seems to reflect a bit about the loss. Throughout the game, the main thing that separates your character from him is your love for Pokemon, something that Silver lacks. I don't know if he eventually changes his ways because I never encountered him again after this, but I do hope he changes for the better. Alright, now we can talk about the Elite Four. Some of these trainers you'll recognize if you played Fire Red or Leaf Green, but others are brand new. The types of trainers you face are Psychic, Poison, Fighting, and Dark. My party was well equipped to counter these trainers, but I did get beat by one of them. The member I failed against was the fourth member, Karen, the Dark type user. Her Umbreon and Houndoom gave me some trouble, but the second time around, I adjusted my strategy and managed to win. The champion of the Elite Four is a character that you met earlier, Lance. Lance is a Dragon type user and carries a whopping 3 Dragonites in his lineup. Honestly, he was probably the easiest trainer I faced here since I built a lot of my strategy around countering him. After defeating Lance, you and your Pokemon are inducted into the Hall of Fame, and soon after, the credits roll. But if you've played any Pokemon game, you'll know that there's always more content after the credits. This next part I'm going to talk about, I genuinely had no idea was a part of SoulSilver. One thing I omitted when talking about the Elite Four is that they were located at the Indigo Plateau, the same location as in Fire Red in the Kanto region. This fact in itself isn't that mind-blowing, but what is what happens in the post-game. After defeating the Elite Four, you receive a ticket from Professor Elm that allows you to take a boat to the Kanto region. And no, not just a city or two, it's basically the entire Kanto region. This means more gyms to battle, more Pokemon to catch, and more game to play. My jaw literally dropped once I arrived in Vermilion City and checked the map. You get to explore Kanto in the DS game style? Like, what? Unfortunately, I didn't get to explore too much of it during my playthrough, but I have plans to go back and do more there in the future. We talked a bit about Lugia, but what about the other legendary Pokemon available in SoulSilver? Early on, you can face Entei and Raikou via random encounters in the wild. They run away pretty fast, but if you make a plan, catching them is easy enough. Suicune, on the other hand, requires a lot more steps to catch, and triggering the event to catch them is part of the postgame. Other available legendaries include the 3 legendary birds from Kanto, Mewtwo, the 3 main legendaries from Pokemon Emerald, and some other via events. But the legendary that is available in SoulSilver that surprised me the most is Ho-Oh. Normally, the main legendary of the opposite game isn't obtainable, so it's really neat that that's an option in both SoulSilver and Heart Gold. In total, after you get a Pokédex upgrade, you have access to nearly 500 Pokemon across 4 generations. That's a lot. And even if you can't catch all of them in a singular game, catching them and migrating them all to a game like SoulSilver is still really cool in my eyes. The ecosystem of games from this generation of Pokemon, I look back fondly on. Now, we have Pokemon Home, but back then transferring Pokemon between games like Emerald, Platinum, and SoulSilver felt special in a different way. I don't really know how to put it into words, but if you played these games back then, or if you're still doing transfers like this today, you probably get what I mean. You had to jump through some hoops to get it to function, but the payoff was definitely worth it. For my first time playing this game, I was thoroughly impressed. From exploring Johto for the first time to the surprise of Kanto being available, I felt like this game kept offering more and more. And through this review, I brought up a few comparisons between it and Fire Red. Is it fair to compare a refined DS title to a GBA game? I think so. It's good to look back on how the series has evolved and what things it has improved on. It's by no means a knock on Fire Red, it's just an acknowledgement of how things became more refined. One thing I'd like to do is go back and start this game over so I can take my time with it. Although I enjoyed my first playthrough of SoulSilver, I feel like there's a lot more to explore and stuff I wasn't able to touch upon. I also want to catch more Pokemon so that I can transfer them over to Pokemon Home to assist with my goal of a complete national dex. Alright, that's gonna do it for this one. Let me know in the comments what's your favorite Pokemon game on the DS. There's a lot of games to choose from, so I'm curious to see your answers. And if you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. I do a variety of video game content here on my channel, including Pokemon game reviews. And if you're interested, you can follow me on social media on Twitter and Instagram at SixSang for updates and funny posts. Thank you so much for watching, hope you tune into the next one, and have a great rest of your day. Peace!